Celia, Cece is what I've been calling her. She's the founder of Giving Others Dreams, so please join us. Mr. Johnny Page, Executive Director of Contestos. We have Mr. Delaney. He is with the Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative. I don't want to mess that up. Our good friend who has been in our office really helping with our kids with peace circles and so forth, Orlando. We have another good friend of ours who's been in our office for quite some time and always helping out, Mr. Mike Buchanan. And to we add one more chair, this is a very close friend of mine, and when I say we pivot a lot, and I'm glad he's here today, and he's going to join us. Mark Mitchell from Teamwork England.
Honor and pleasure to be here with all of you guys sharing space. Thank you all for coming out today. Give yourself a round of applause because we can't do nothing without you. So my name is Celia Colon, but a lot of people just use my initials, which is CC, and I'm good with that. My path is just like a lot of our brothers and sisters that have been locked up. You know, 90% of people who go to prison have been victims first, and that's exactly what my story is. So I grew up with a mother who suffers from severe mental health issues, and because of that, right, I grew up in a very violent home. I grew up in a very unsupported home. I seen a lot of things I shouldn't have seen. I went through a lot of things I shouldn't have went through before I even turned 11. At the age of 11 is when my life took a change, and we were actually living in Florida at the time. So I come from a family of migrant workers, people who work on the fields and pick all the fruit and vegetables that end up on your table. And because of that, I learned how to drive at a very young age. When I was 8 years old is when I first started taking the trucks up and down the paths while we were picking up oranges. And I always say it was God's reason. When I turned 11, my mother was brutally beaten by one of her boyfriends. All of her relationships were always domestic violent relationships because she was unhealthy. Everything that I went through as a child, physical abuse, child sex abuse, just like Adolfo, when I was younger, I hated my mother. I didn't understand who she was, because if you had a mother, what I seen on TV, mothers were people that protected you, that cared about you, that loved you, not people that gave you away and beat you, right? So at the age of 11, my mother got brutally beat by her boyfriend. He beat her with a palote, which is a rolling pin to make tortillas. And when he beat her with it, it was shiny, it was silver, so I don't know if it was a pipe or what it was. But he beat her so bad that he left her on the floor and bloody. And I always tell people, I don't know what got into me, but all I say is, God, I crawled underneath my mom, I put her on my back, and I put her in the back of our station wagon. We had a station wagon, it was a white one, just like the movie from Ghostbusters. I put all my brothers and sisters in the back seat. There was 5 of them under the age of 6. I grabbed 2 yellow phone books. Who remembers yellow phone books? I'm aging myself here, right? Because I couldn't reach the pedals because I was very little. I mean, I'm short and I'm not that big anyway. So at the age of 11, I was probably like 3'5", I don't know. But I was really little, and I jumped on these 2 yellow phone books, and I jumped on Highway 75, and I came to Chicago. Because I knew that this is where my family was at. I knew how to get here because it was a route that we always took. And I'll never forget that day because my mother woke up when we were in Tennessee. And I remember looking at all the big bricks everywhere on the walls and stuff. And she's like, what did you do? Where are you going? What are we doing? And I told her, I said, I'm not living like that no more. So if you want to stay and go with this man, you go. I said, but if you're going to try to take me back, I said, we were like on the edge of like a cliff, like by mountains. I said, I'm going to kill myself because I'm not going back there. So we ended up driving to Chicago. I moved right on 89th and Muskegon. 89th and Muskegon was Latin King headquarters. I told everybody what had just happened to me, where I just came from back in the day. The gangs were not gangs. They were actually like community organizations. They took care of the block, they fed the kids. The first time I ever went to Six Flags was with my gang family. They took me in, they took care of me, and I became very loyal. I made bad decisions. I became a teen mom. And one of the bad decisions ended up with me getting locked up at 17, going to prison at 18, coming home right before I turned 26. So growing up in the prison system is different than any other thing that you could think about. One of the things that people don't talk about is the harm that happens to women. We have different needs, we have different barriers, and we go through different harms. I'm one of the many faces of prison rape, something that stays with you for your entire life. You gotta think about rape in the free world. There's police stations that have backlogs with rape kits from people that live in the free world. So imagine a convict, right? That's what they call us, trying to say, this officer hurt me. They never did anything to officers, they just transferred them to other units. And today, women are still being raped. There was no PREA back in the 90s, there was none of those things. One of the things that I did do for justice is State Rep Sonia Harper, I helped her create a resolution date for anybody that put in a grievance for rape with PREA. That was my justice. When I left prison, well, before I left prison, I joined a program, a hospice program in prison in Dixon, Illinois. It was called WHO, Women Helping Others. And it was the first time I ever met social workers that told me that I was dealing with unhealed trauma. And it was the first time I ever heard that I was dealing and I was unattached to my emotions. And that's when I decided to learn everything that you could about the mind and how you heal. And that started my healing journey. Before I left, I created something called the MAP, Make It Another Path, which is a business plan for your life. I've been in this healing journey for 21 years. I do the same for the women coming home because I know that we're all dealing with harm and trauma. And it was in 2000 when I created GOD because I thought about all the women that I left behind who had stories like mine or worse.
Man, my story starts with trauma, right? Unfortunately, I grew up in a community where trauma was just an everyday reality, and the thing about trauma is, right, we're not going to get through life without some source of trauma, but the problem is that we don't have the mechanisms in place in our communities to address the trauma. So as a young person, I watched someone killed in my grandmother's yard and watched them bleed out in my grandmother's living room when I was about 6, right? So by the time I was 8 years old, I had seen enough death and destruction to last a lifetime. And because I don't think my parents understood trauma, I don't think their parents understood trauma, it was just something when we talked about, right, well, you know, I remember some of all these things were happening. When things were happening, it was just like, go back to school, right? How do you just go back to school? I'm 6, I'm 7, I'm 8 years old. By the time I was 8 years old, I had, you know, like I said, I experienced so much death. And so as a result of that, as that fight, flight, freeze, the trauma mechanism kicks in, what happens? In Chicago, you don't run and you don't freeze, right? So I became a fighter. And so that became my practice, that's who I became, and I just fought my way through life up until the moment I was sent to prison. I was sent to prison, I was wrongfully incarcerated, wrongfully convicted. I say that to say, and I say that clearly because, you know, there's two things. I make a distinction between innocence and guilt. I wasn't guilty, but I was far from innocent because, again, I fought my way through life and I had put myself in places and spaces that allowed or contributed to the environment that created the situation or the circumstances that I found myself in. But when I went to prison, I wasn't the person that just like, okay, let me figure it out. I was angry as hell. I was wrongfully convicted. I know I didn't do it. I know I wasn't there. So it's one of those situations. It's not a situation where I was proximal. It was just, it had nothing to do with me. And so I was angry. And I spent the first few years I always say you spend the first 7 years of incarceration angry anyway, just pissed off, mad as hell. And so I spent probably the first 10. And so there was a lot of different things that was taking place and the person, that violent person, that person who I was on the streets was the person that showed up in prison. The difference being though, that and this is interesting enough because we had this conversation yesterday. I remember when I first got to prison, I said, what got me here is not gonna keep me here, right? So I didn't wanna be Johnny Page, right? I didn't wanna be that person. And so I told myself what got me here wasn't gonna keep me here, but the prison system wasn't set up for me to be successful in the sense that there were spaces for me to go and find the help and the supports I needed. I had to find that on my own, and it took me 10 years navigating, but eventually I got there. And as a result of just like my experiences, one of the things that happened was, and it's interesting enough that we're out here in Westport and Roseland, the Darren Albert situation in 2009, right? I remember I was in a prison, and me and some other folks, we were just talking about this, and we started thinking about like, what do we do? How do we give back? How do we sort of address some of these issues? And we started doing research. I was in a college and prison program, and we started doing research, and stumbled across this thing, this idea of trauma and understanding what trauma and what it does to us, right? And so from that moment on, my transformation began, right? Because that became the world that I dove into. And so the work that I currently do is sort of it's an opportunity to unpack this stuff early, right? So I don't want us to wait. So Contextual is a storytelling organization, but we use the power of our personal narratives as a mechanism for healing and transformation. And so what we do is we help you unpack your bag. Right, so right now you got all of us coming in. We came in this room in this bag. You come into the world, you get a bag. So when the doctor pop you on your butt, they hand you a bag. In that bag, that first 10, 11, 12 years of your life, it's your community, it's your environment, it's your family. All those things are placing stuff in that bag. When you're around 12, 13, just think about the 6th grader that leaves 1 year and then comes back a totally different 7th grader. That's because there's an awareness. It's connected to puberty and all those other things, but just think about there's an awareness that happens that you become aware of your environment and the things that's taking place around you, and so you start stuffing stuff in that bag. And we walking around and we wondering why folks are hurt, why their shoulders hurt, why their back hurt, why they bent over, is because they're carrying around all this baggage. Right? And so what Contexto does, we create spaces and opportunity for healing and transformation because we allow you to sort of dump out that bag and help you sort through it.
I always say that I first came into contact with the justice system at around 6 or 7 years of age. After my father returned home from serving in the Army, he came home with a heroin addiction and like complications from that. I seen my mom experience domestic violence and those complications from his heroin addiction led him to prison. From there, my mother had 3 boys at that time. I was the second oldest. We moved from the west side of Chicago to the southwest side of Chicago in a project area. And just seeing my mother raise like 3 boys on her own, which is also a common thread that I heard up here today with mothers raising men or young boys. By the time I was 14 years of age, and so my father came from a big family. My grandmother had 14 children, 11 boys and 3 girls. And so I had all of these uncles that I would emulate. They were leaders and members of one of the largest street gang organizations in Chicago. And so although they wasn't teaching me that lifestyle, I still was learning it from them by observation. And by the time I was 14, I had become a member and leader of one of those same street gang organizations. Going into high school, I was at the top of my grade, very athletic, ended up dropping out of high school in the 3rd year, selling drugs, using drugs. By the time I was 18, became a teen parent. That same year was the victim of gun violence. And the following year, because of my activities in the street, we had started from selling drugs to robbing drug dealers. end up in a robbery situation where another young black male lost his life. And so now I'm 19 years of age, facing life imprisonment, and subsequently sentenced to 45 years. And it was during that time being sent down to a Stateville prison at 20 years of age, which was one of the most violent prisons in the nation at that time. Being a young black male, I began to just reassess some of the decisions I had made, reassess the environment I had grown up in, and reassess the system that I landed in. Enrolled myself back in school, obtained a GED, paralegal certificate, and began like functioning as what some people call a jailhouse lawyer. Started mentoring other young black and brown males that I found myself incarcerated with. From there, spending 5 years in a maximum security prison, I used to interact with an elder who was a lifer at that time, and there was someone up here mentioned, I think it was Adolfo, about him having life imprisonment, and I found that ironic because during my time, early on at Stateville, I would often go talk to this lifer at the law library, and I would tell people I had life imprisonment because I couldn't even see like my release date 45 years down the line. And I remember one day he told me to bring my calculation sheet. And for those who don't know, a calculation sheet is a document that IDOC administration gives everyone upon entering the facility. It has a calculation of the date you will be released or the projected date you will be released. And so he asked me to bring that calculation sheet to the law library with me one day, and I didn't even think nothing of it. But it was during that conversation that he told me to stop telling people that you don't have a release date. And so he pulled out his calculation sheet, and he was like, "You see, my date and his date, it had natural life. He didn't have a release date." And he was like, "You have a release date, so always prepare yourself to be released one day. You have a child, you have a family, you have potential within you." And so it was from that day forward that I really started just investing in my own self and preparing myself for that release, although it was still decades away. From there, I ended up acquiring my associate's degree while I was incarcerated, functioned as a paralegal prison law clerk for 12, 13 years straight. But it was during those conversations with a lot of the men that used to come to the law library that I began to learn about collateral barriers and collateral sanctions. These are laws that prevent people with criminal records from getting housing or getting a job. And so that kind of perplexed me because I was trying to figure out how can you have one set of laws that says once a person commits a criminal offense, you pay your debt to society through whether it's community service, whether it's through jail time, prison time, but then you have a whole other set of laws that says if a person acquires a criminal record, you can't get housing, or you can't get a job, or you can't get in school. And so that started me on another mission, and to say that I would not just advocate for myself, but I will be advocating for a lot of men and women that will be coming after me. And that was my passion, like finally being released after 22 years inside of the Department of Corrections. End up working with a criminal justice legal firm in another state, became a restorative justice practitioner, developed my own trauma-informed based support group for system-impacted people just out of the need of healing and trauma-centered services that wasn't being provided to myself. And so ended up relocating back to the Chicagoland area, and several years later got recruited to work in the Lieutenant Governor's office as a reentry policy coordinator. And one of the first projects that I launched was, we went into a pandemic like a month later. One of the first projects that I launched was just having conversations with Department of Corrections and Secretary of State, knowing the need for individuals coming home during that time that Secretary of State facilities were closed. Like, how will individuals be able to get an identification card or a driver's license, knowing how essential it is? And so we launched a pilot program to provide state identifications for men and women prior to their release, instead of once they're out and having to navigate all of these systems out here. And so that project is now 2 years running, where we're able to provide men and women like state identifications prior to their release. So that's one of the impactful programs that I would say I'm proud of spearheading as part of this work that we're involved in.
And I had the privilege of working with Director Yakov each and every day. You know, the common themes that we've all been speaking to have been centered around lack of access, lack of opportunities, lack of resources, and those are the things that end up creating the conditions in our environments, in our communities, that lead many of us to prison, that lead many of us to think that there's nobody out there to support us. I grew up in a home similar to my brother Adolfo, full of domestic violence. There was a lot of substance use within my household, and the one person that I never doubted loved me is my mother, and yet she did things and put herself through things, and in turn put her children through things that always made me think, man, does she really love me and my sister, right? But it speaks to that conditioning and some of the normalizing things that our parents go through, where domestic violence seems normal. And to me, what ended up happening is it created in me a deep-seated anger and fear that became internalized, and I ended up hating myself at a very young age. Went to school, and that message of you ain't worth anything was further complicated by having teachers who reiterated that same message: you ain't gonna be nothing, you ain't gonna amount to nothing. So I adopted that mentality, and operating off hurt will only lead to hurting people. And I think that's my story throughout my childhood, man. Like, I was the person that parents would warn their children about not to hang out with, because it would lead to trouble. So I grew up alone, and like my brother Adolfo, I found comfort in the collective trauma of others like myself who were looking for belonging, who were looking for just somewhere to feel like there was a sense of love. Not knowing that those decisions and those bonds that I was creating would end up leading me to spending 20 years in prison for a very deep harm that I caused to another person that ended up in him losing his life. And at the age of 17, going into a system, carrying that burden of feeling like I had pretty much destroyed my own humanity by what I had done, it was hard. And I'm the beneficiary of being around really good people. There's this restorative justice value, right, that speaks to, we all have a deep desire to be in right relationship with the people around us. We want to be in right relationships with people. And thankfully, there was older brother named Capone that I always acknowledge, that took it upon himself to approach the 17-year-old at the back of the table reading his Bible, because we all know how we find Jesus real quick when we get in some trouble, right? But he came back to the table. I was sitting there and I was reading the Bible. He's like, man, I see you like to read. Would you like to read a book I can give you? And he gave me this big old book. It was like 1,500 pages long, but that's what began a relationship and me seeing myself and my humanity in another person. And I got lucky to run across similar people, some sitting at this table who taught me how to embrace my humanity as a way of embracing the humanity in other people. Education played a big role in allowing me to grow in intellect, but there was always something missing, and thankfully the brothers at Danville, in particular Johnny and 11 other brothers, created this group called CAVE, Community Anti-Violence Education. And that group was centered around teaching us how to unpack trauma and learn the language of trauma, to be able to use it as a way of not only healing ourselves, but to be able to share that information. And once we came home, to be able to impact our communities in a positive way by instilling that knowledge in young people. And access, opportunity, I was introduced to Father Kelly about 2 weeks after coming home, told him my story similar to what I'm sharing with y'all today, and talked about Cave, about the need for Cave, and about us being able to use those spaces not only to learn about ACEs, not only average childhood experiences, or to learn about trauma, but to actually have people around us that can help us to find our healing and collectively heal, and to share that healing and to spread that healing, because relationships is what I will say has been the special sauce, so to speak, in my success out here. It's relationships and ongoing connectedness that has led me to the work that I currently do in the Office of Lieutenant Governor alongside Yaakov, because I met Yaakov about 2 years, a year and a half after working at Precious Blood. We bonded and we became brothers. Johnny been my brother since I was a young whippersnapper, finding reasons to fight on the basketball court. But again, right, learning about what it is that makes us tick, being able to have spaces to unpack all those things, and knowing that there's going to be somebody there you can call who can accompany you when things get real. And one thing I'll leave it on, one of the things that inspires me to do the work is relationships. And one of the programs, one of the initiatives that I'm proud of to be working on together with other stakeholders is the Healing Beyond Harm Restorative Justice Pilot. It's a way of allowing or creating spaces for people who are incarcerated for harm to write an apology letter to the people they have harmed. And also for crime survivors in the community to have the opportunity to engage the person that has caused them harm. So if you're a survivor sitting within this space today, or if you know somebody who's looking to connect and find answers for the harm that they haven't been able to unpack on their own, I would love to, hand you more information about that, because that's the process of healing. The system is currently not set up for that, but we're hoping to start changing the ways in which the system works so that we can all start finding not only our own healing, but our collective healing, and to be able to heal our communities, because there's a lot of hurt out there. And we see it play out day in and day out on the news. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Michael Cannon. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for having me, and I'd like to thank everyone for the shared interest that you all have and the work that we all do to make reentry better for the state of Illinois. I'd like to give a special thanks to Phalanx for the work that they do in the community. It's great work. I have to say, listening to the individuals that came before me made it very emotional for me. Just like last time when we came for the mental health session, when you're incarcerated, it's such a horrible pain, right? It is so deep, and it was the worstest pain that I ever thought existed in this world until I lost my loved ones during that incarceration. And I found out that it was a worse pain. So listening to them made some of those feelings surface that you try to push away, that you don't ever want to feel again, because it's constant and it's never ending, and it's the first thing you feel when you open up your eyes in the morning. It's the last thing you feel before you go to bed at night. When you laugh and you're crying inside the entire time, it's a nightmare. So listening to them brought a lot of those emotions up that I didn't want to feel. But sometimes it's good to feel those emotions, because you don't want to feel those emotions anymore. You don't want to do what caused that harm to you and those loved ones anymore. So with saying that, my story is different, right? I don't have the Adolfo's story or a lot of the stories that the brothers, the sisters before me had about drug-addicted parents and terrible situations, that's not my story. And that's why it makes it more shameful for me. I had the best parents in the world. I mean, I almost don't want to say it here in the stories before me, but I really did. I had a great set of parents. I was very well educated. Catholic school, kindergarten through 8th grade, had all the opportunities. My father was a great provider, made sure that we had everything that we wanted, everything that we needed, and we got maybe half of what we wanted. You know, but I come from the same area where everyone else comes from. I had the great background, but I still came from the same environment. And that's where I went wrong. Wrong choices. Looking at the things in the neighborhood and looking at the excitement. My thing was the guys with the flashy cars and all the beautiful women and all of the money. That's who I wanted to be like. You know what they say. Well, whatever you're going to be the best of what you're going to be, right? So those were my role models. And back then, like Celia and Cove attested to, the allurement of the street organizations is strong in our city, especially Chicago, probably anywhere else up in the United States. I mean, it's entrenched in our culture, in our neighborhoods. And when I came up, the organizations were there, like they said, to do a lot of good in the neighborhood, right? So all of the people that I came around were people who did have those problems, but those were my friends. You know what I mean? So coming up through the Catholic school and watching those role models, I wanted to be that role model, and I did. I became that guy that everybody wanted to be in the streets with the money and the cars and all of that type of stuff there. And my notoriety became so much so, that's what led to my prison sentence. They sentenced me to 60 years. I didn't have a murder. The case was bogus. I don't want to say that we all were innocent. I was doing wrong. The people were doing wrong. We were doing wrong. And it culminated in a shooting and a bunch of other stuff. And the offense that I got convicted of carried not less than 6 years, no more than 30. They gave me 60, which was the maximum for murder. But it wasn't really about the case. It was about me, and it was about those wrong choices that I made, and it was about me thinking I was smart. And I never really got caught for the things that I did in the street. Well, at least I thought I didn't, till I got that 60-year sentence, right? Thought I got away. The sentence was bogus. It was found unconstitutional in 2000. They made me do every bit of that time. So when you get a 60-year sentence, you're not promised to come up out of that situation. If you're looking at reality, you're looking at all the things that might occur during that time. You don't want to face it. So I started off my time in 1991, January of 1991. I was 29 years old. I served 29 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, half of my life. And Adolfo talked about Sid. You asked a question about at what point did you decide to change? I was in a similar situation. I was in Menard, which is already inside the ground. They call it the pit. It used to be a rock quarry. So all I have to do is throw dirt on top of you, you're already inside the ground. But I was in SIG. So they have segregation, isolation, they have the bars. but they had me extra behind a door where the only thing is just a slot there, right? And the situation was so horrible that the only time they open the chuck hole is to give you some food. And it was so roach infested in there that if you didn't get your tray right away, or if you were asleep or something, you'd hear the roaches eating the styrofoam trays, right? And I'm like, and then we talk about isolation, right? So I was there for a year, and the cell is was so small, and you know how small I am. I could put one arm on this wall, right? And touch the other arm with this wall. And you got bunk beds in there, and a toilet and a sink in the back. So that's how small it was for an entire year. And under those circumstances, I'm like, I can't die in a place like this. I watch people die, I watch suicides, I knew it wasn't promised for me to come up out of that situation. So it was at that point that I decided to change. So, you know, you have a lot of time to think. So I'm thinking about all the ills of life. I'm like, okay, I gotta start writing this stuff down, right? I started thinking about everything from the elderly to the youth. I'm jotting stuff down. So I get out. I'm on this mission to, you know, come up with all of these different programs, the things that I see that's wrong around me in society. But, you know, the person that I became, the notoriety that I had in prison, they would get my paperwork, right? Talking about housing the homeless, feeding the poor. They would lock me up. They would say, threat to the safety and security of the institution, unauthorized organizational activity, you know, and they would put me under investigation for 30 days. They'd let me out on the 29th day without a charge. And I'd be like, well, which part was the threat? You know, the part about feeding the poor or housing the homeless, you know, they just, you know what it is. So it was at that point that I decided to change my life. I got locked down in Pontiac in segregation again during this time. I lost my baby sister on her way coming to visit me while I was in isolation. I lost my parents. But I got to Kiwani Life Skills Reentry Center. I never thought that they would let me go to this new place. It was a Life Skills Reentry Center. I'm like, they saying all of this stuff about this place. If they give out this much of it, it would be a great last stop if I can get there. So, you know, they required for you to do an essay. I'm like, well, I doubt if they send me, but let me give it a shot. It was the Creator's will. I got there. When I got there is where I met Ricky. But before I met Ricky, I was in orientation, and the assistant warden was, you know, she was talking about giving back to the community. And, you know, I had just got in trouble for all of this stuff, right? But I still, all the while, I still found a way to hide my stuff, continue to put it down on paper. So she was like, I was like, well, do you all help people with nonprofits? Do you all help people with programs? She said, I got just the person that I'd like to introduce you to. The very next night she saw me, she said, you, come here. I'm like, damn, what did I do? I just got here. I'm in trouble already. So she marched me in the gym. She said, Ricky, come here. She introduced me to Ricky. And Ricky at the time, he was heading up a program called True Roads. We hit it off right away. We ended up helping to build that program into the first restorative justice program in the history of the Illinois Department of Corrections. We got involved heavily in workforce development. We did job summits. We did the first promotional workforce development video in the history of the state of Illinois. So he had a nonprofit, I had a nonprofit. And we worked so well together. Not only plugging our weaknesses, so to speak, but we multiplied our strengths. We didn't just make each other, you know, plug those holes, but we made each other better. So we had a lot of the same ideas. We said, okay, let's marry our ideas together and let's do this out in the world. Whoever get out first. So I was slated to get out first. We had a plan. I had a plan. We knew that we wanted to work in this work. In Kiwani, we had the opportunity to meet a lot of important people, funders, decision makers, just people across the state. And a lot of people didn't know who those people were, but I was asking questions. Who are you? What do you do? And I met those people, I built those relationships, and when I got out, I touched down with some of those people. One of them was Avik Das's predecessor, Ms. Delreese Adams. She invited me to be on the Cook County Coordinated Reentry Council, which is all of the stakeholders in Illinois. The State's Attorney's Office, Public Defender's Office, IDOC, Cook County Jail, all of the CBOs. It was huge. And what they did was the county and the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, they petitioned the federal government to reduce, for us to reduce the recidivism rate in Chicago and suburban Cook County. And what they did during that recommendation, they came up with recommendations to what they needed to do, and one of the recommendations was to create a coordinated reentry system. Like Ricky said, they always had I can wrap it up. I can be long-winded. I can be long-winded. I'm sorry for that. I'm passionate. But they petitioned the federal government to create this coordinated reentry system. So it led to my employment now as reentry navigator for the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. I was instrumental in helping to design that piloted coordinated reentry system that we're currently implementing in Cook County and Chicago and suburban Cook County. And I'd like to give a shout out to County again for extending, Madam Preckwinkle for expanding the program for now for those who are returning to community. So that's my story. And thank you for having me.
I'm Mark Mitchell. I'm the Associate Director of Reentry Services for Teamwork Inglewood. I have 13 felony convictions and 4 post-incarceration degrees, the latter 2 being Masters in Criminal Justice and Masters in Political and Justice Studies. None of that. I started out in this field, no one would give me a job. Benny Lee told me I had to be a contractor, so I worked 10 halfway houses. After doing that for 5 years, they needed a position at Teamwork Inglewood for a reentry program manager. Benny Lee got me the job. When I got there, the job was do one thing. When someone calls 311 and they from Inglewood or the South Side, they call us. My job was to refer them to the usual suspects. I told him I couldn't in good conscience do that. He said, well, do whatever you want to do back there. So I remember at doing my second master's, I'm about to go to Martin Luther King and say, somewhere I read that if a middle-aged returning resident is employed within 90 days of release, he has a high work ethic or just as good a work ethic as the average person. That this work ethic starts to dissipate if unemployment persists beyond the 90 days. Now we already know if dude come home and he ain't got a job in 3 months, he back in that life. They didn't need best evidence to tell us that, right? So he said, do what you want. So I became my own job developer, my own outreach, my own case management, my own everything. I went out, I found the plant. They needed someone to come. It was a 12-hour hard job. They said, okay, we'll buy into that middle-aged thing. Send me 8 people. I sent them 8. Next week, send me 8 more. I sent them 8. Next week, send me 8 more. Next week, send me 8 more. After a month, they called me and they had 5 temp agents. They said, look, your retention rate, the temp agents, was 20% at 1 month. They said, Mr. Mitchell's is 80%. Started my program to roll. Ever since then, this is a subcontractor for Ford Motor Company. We own 70% of that plant. I extended to do more than that. I kept doing more. I kept finding more. The thing about referring people is, see, reentry has been focused and ran the same way for 40 years. Job readiness, mock interviews, that's when they was 25 to 30 years old. The average age now coming out is 45, 46 years old. Old men ain't got time to sit in the class and don't eat. They can't sleep on your couch all day and your man like, when he gonna leave? What he doing every day? We going to job readiness. He ain't ready yet for no job. He been gone for 2 months. When he gonna be ready? Right? My goodness, then y'all got chaos. So we send them as soon as they get home. They ain't home a week before we send them. We start sending them, we give them bus cards for the first few weeks. We give them boots, whatever they need, we buy it all. If they lose that job, that ain't no big deal with us. We're gonna get you another one. We're gonna get you another. They say, you gonna hold their hand? Yeah, I'm gonna hold their hand. It is asinine to believe that you can tell a person who's been in and out of prison 45 times to put the onus on him to negotiate a path. He has never successfully negotiated. He has never did it. He keeps going back, but the onus is on him. No, it's on us. So we changed that. We have been successful. The city said, wow, woke up and said, y'all doing that? They said, we're going to pay you to put 300 people wrap around so replace 100. You got 18 months. We finished in 6. We tripled it in 18 months. All right? Now, I'm sending people downtown because the law states in Illinois that once you get 3 years off parole or probation, you can have your criminal record sealed. Now, what does seal mean? Seal means law enforcement can still see it, but the courts, landlords can't see it. Jobs can't see it, right? So I sent a guy, say, you've been messing with me 3 years. Go down, you've been on parole, go do it. He goes downtown to them people. They say, well, look, he gets there at 9 o'clock. They say, open at 9. They say, well, no, we only take the first 25. 20. Man, go with that clock. That man woke me out. All right, so look, 25. So he came back. He was humiliated. He felt degraded and insulted. So what did I do? I applied for a grant from his people, Jack County. They gave me 1.5. We have our own legal clinic right in Eaglewood now. So if you might go somewhere and wonder why you ain't getting a job, you may have gotten arrested and think because they threw it out, it went away. No, sir, buddy. You still got slave papers with rap sheets. You still got a rap sheet on you. Come down there, let me get it out. Our service is free. Now, I also got another program. This is how you do it real fast. This is how I don't do it. Look, I'm also figuring out why people don't know things. So I got a community navigator program. For instance, people say weed is legal. How many people believe that? No. The use of marijuana at home is legal. Marijuana ain't legal. You can believe that if you want to. Pull up on the police, smell like weed, and they say, you been smoking. Yep, it's legal. You going to jail. You going to jail, man. You don't even know. Look, go on with that talk, man. They may have watched the time. I keep you putting that thing on back there. All right? Look, you going to jail. The landlords, did you know that Cook County, his people once again said that you cannot discriminate against a person when renting a unit if the background is over 3, conviction is over 3 years old. All right? Because y'all wasn't written to nobody. So now if you do that, guess what happens? His people sue you. You cannot discriminate against a person. If it's under 3, you can pull it, tell them why, and then, but other than that, no, you can't. We do mentoring. Now look, one other thing we did. During the pandemic, we had a nice chance to look at something. During the pandemic, we did an audit of our own program. We wondered why were so many people having job abandonment within the first 2 weeks? Why? So we did some surveys and some quantitative and qualitative research. Found out that they were intimidated. Our people never had a job. So what would I do? I have a virtual reality headset. They put on, they come in my office for 2 weeks. It teaches them anything from precision measurement, all OSHA regulations, blueprint reading, and I pay them $700 at the end of them 2 weeks. Right? So we don't have them come on, because I know they on your couch. I know this. So I'm going to make sure when they come on here, I got a few dollars. And then they're going straight to work after that. Mentoring is important. When I was an undergrad, they said, Mark Mitchell, you wanted at the office. Now, wanted at the office, never been a good thing for me. Never. In grammar school, in high school, they called me to the office. Next thing you know, me and a guy I never met before got a strong arm robbery. I'm in Idaho, I ain't did nothing. Right? When the one time I had a job, the man said, Mark, come to the office and bring all the black guys with you. I said, cool, y'all gonna watch me be the first black supervisor. Right? I got there and the man said, you fired and take the rest of these niggas with you. Right? He fired all of them. Right? In the joint, y'all know when they come by, the lieutenant want to see you, where you going? Y'all know they're going to say it. So when they told me in school, you want at the office, I said, Lord, they got me. I'm done. I called my mentor. I said, man, they got me. He said, what you do? I said, don't know, but they got me. He said, man, go see it. I said, man, they got me. He said, go see. After some visit, that's why I mentioned important. I walked in the office, and the woman looked at me and she said, you summa cum laude. I said, you're a goddamn lie. My name is Mark Mitchell. I don't know what Summa did, but you ain't gonna give me that case, right? She told me, she said, look, idiot, summa cum laude means you smarter than 5%, 95% of the people here. I said, my name's idiot now, right? She said, yes. And I said, look, I got dignified. I said, ma'am, you can retain your pretentious titles. They're unwarranted here. She said, well, I'll just keep this $1,000 check. I said, look, I was just playing, right? My mama named Mary cum laude, my dad was Harold cum laude. I ain't had no, look, the important thing about this is we cannot replace fathers with mentors. Clinton tried that. These people need fathers. Right now, if a guy comes home and his kid looks at him and he's struggling, he don't, he say, okay, this is my destiny. We've locked up his grandfathers, his fathers, his uncles, his big brothers, his cousins. He thinks there's one thing left for him. If we can't change the narrative by going back and saving the people we should have saved from a long time ago, then we're going to continue to see what we see now. We've always focused on one population, youth, and we've never did them good. We need to go back and have a dual approach, one for their fathers and grandfathers and one for them. Thank y'all for laughing.
Glad you went there.
We want to let you guys know that we have been working with some youth through the SCAN program, which is the service for just coordinating for individuals who are between the ages of 14 to 24 that has been in some way in the justice system. And so for the last 3 years, we have seen well over 47 individuals. But there's two in particular that we just want to recognize tonight, and we want to just recognize them in case if you guys see them in the process of their successful reentry, just to put your arms around them. And if we can find Larry, he can come in here. They went to look for him. But one of them is here now, Mr. Joel. He's here. Here come Larry. And I want Larry to just introduce these two individuals, and we want to just really celebrate just the success that they've made just in the last 12 months and what they have going for themselves before we close. So Larry?
Okay, so I was asked to speak about a couple of my participants that has been successful and doing things within the program and staying on track. So I'm gonna call them both up. First is Mr. Daniel Thornton. Sometimes when you are going through programs and you got a lot of distractions out here in the streets, it's easy to fall off, and a couple of us have experienced, we've been working with these youth, and it'd be a Friday, you talk to them, and then come Monday, they're gone, and I mean moved away, so, these guys have been staying focused and staying on track, either completing the vocational trades or gaining unsubsidized employment. So with that being said, I just want to first of all, acknowledge them, and then
Nothing like money, right?
nothing like money.
Nothing like money.
And give both of them gift cards to show out my appreciation and show that we've been thinking about it and standing strong with them. Anything y'all like to say?
Thank you. We're proud of you. It's a blessing to be here. I appreciate all the speakers. It was really motivational, and it meant a lot. It helped every step.
I appreciate everybody coming to support. Thank you.
I know they look like twins with matching black hair gigs, but it's all good.
Keep doing the right thing and the next right thing, and everything will fall in place. Never be scared to ask for help. I like to say, they know we're all flawsome, we're all full of flaws, but we awesome. And you're not alone. You got a village here. I've had the same number for 21 years since I've been home. I'm always a text away. You can have my number before I leave. If anybody wants it, it's 312-804-8209. Any of these brothers right here, you could call any of them, text any of them.
That's right.
Before you decide to do something that you don't really think you should be doing, you could call any of your village people and we're gonna be there for you. Understand that you're not alone and you don't have to go through this alone. You're in a great space with great people that just want to see you succeed, and we want to see you succeed. You got a lot to give to this world, and we're waiting for you.
Oh, I just want to say one thing.
312-804-8209. That's my number. CC, text me
That's
anytime.
CC's number, y'all call it next. So, understand this, man. After struggle come ease.
Come on, man.
That's all you gotta understand. After struggle come ease. Embrace the struggle.
That's right, that's right.
And just to share with you the work that they're doing, the success of the work, and just really having a dialogue to really just understand our work in reentry and how we move this project and this work forward. And without further ado, I want to give the floor to our newly elected Alderman Mosley of the 21st Ward, because if you didn't know, you are sitting in the new 21st Ward, and so we appreciate him coming out just to welcome us so we can get this conversation started. So.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for coming to the 21st Ward. Give it up for Phelan. They are celebrating 20 years. 20 years coming up. A great partnership under the leadership and direction of Ms. Tina. I'm Ronnie Mosley, and I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the next alderman of the 21st Ward. And so this event today is special, and I want to make sure that you all capitalize on this opportunity. So I'm going to give you a challenge. And that challenge is actually going to come from the late great ancestor now, Harry Belafonte, who said that if I come in contact with someone and their mind, their heart, their soul is better than when they first came in contact with me, then that will be success.
Yes.
So let that define the success today. As you meet folks, as you network with them, as you share your stories and connect, let that person leave you in a better position. And this event, I have no doubt, will be a success. So again, thank you for coming to the 21st Ward. Looking forward to serving you.
I wasn't going to introduce him, but he said I have to. So now I am bringing up our one and only mental health specialist who has really been guiding this work with us to make sure that we understand just the trauma just of reentry in both sides. Mr. Sidney Johnson is going to go ahead and start our first panel.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you. Before I introduce the first group of panelists, I want to show, we're going to start with a short video clip. One of our panelists in particular, actually two are featured in this video clip, and WTTW started doing a program, I think it's called First Hand Life After Prison, in which they're allowing you to hear from people who were directly impacted and get the first-hand experience from the experience. And so it kind of gives you a really good snapshot of what they have to go through in order to kind of successfully re-enter. And so, like I said, two of our participants were featured in this, and so we're going to start with a short clip.
You would think that are simple to do, they are a little bit more tedious.
You good?
Yeah, I'm checking for you, making sure you all right.
I woke up this morning with so many thoughts for you, man, like re-entry events and stuff.
I met Ricky inside of Kiwani. Like, Ricky had been there since it was open, and he was doing everything. He had built a lot of models down there as far as classes, curriculum, and things like that to teach guys.
Kiwani was like, who else is putting videos of the internet,
Right.
showing you educational stuff, you know?
Yeah. Me and Ricky clicked really quickly. we were both on the same path as far as reentry, helping people, and kind of making up for our past.
But because of the legacy that you did leave, it allowed me to show other brothers who were coming in on the new how to engage and do what needed to be done and push it back in the right direction.
Ricky went home in August of 2021.
So many things that had been lost were coming back.
Ricky works for Phalanx Family Services, a community organization that helps disenfranchised families, sub-income families, helping guys with housing, jobs, basic necessity, things like that.
And you gonna see, man, I love my job, bro.
What brings you to Phalanx Family Services this morning?
I've just been recently released from prison and I'm in need of reentry services. Basically what I'm looking for right now is a job or a career that will give me sustainable income and possible way of transportation.
So this is the road home. It's the pilot reentry program for Chicago and Cook County. So I always tell people, like, I know it sounds crazy, you know, but there's always been a system to guide people into incarceration, but there's never been a coordinated one to guide people out. Right now we're doing assessments because it's only a set number of individuals that we're servicing. Okay. And you and I know the importance of the success of something like this. Like, we really just look for guys who actually want it. Give me some of your employment background and where would you say your skills lie?
Okay, well, obviously I just said I worked for Public Works this year. Prior to that, I was working in prison in an ICI industry for 10 years. Now, my title there was floor manager. I had to do profit and loss statements, a lot of accounting things. Yes.
This was a little different, Bill.
With the interview, I was grateful for the chance to do it, and I was grateful that they appreciated my potential. The last time I was in society, cash was king, and it spoke volumes. Now we're in a different society where I'm learning how to navigate with the credit and the credit cards and everything else.
Our main goal is to make sure that what you're feeling right now goes away fast.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
How do you eat a whale?
How do I eat?
A whale.
A whale? Oh, one piece at a time.
And that's how we're gonna do this.
Okay.
One day at a time, one bite at a time. Okay.
All right, thank you guys for that. Absolutely awesome. And so, it is with great pleasure that I introduce the panel. I am in a distinct and privileged position at Phalanx, and that I get to meet every person that re-enters our office. And I can't tell you how fortunate of a position that is. I have been blessed by them as much as I've been able to contribute. And so Nick, upon my first time meeting him, the wisdom that he just showed in answering that question about eating a whale one bite at a time is the wisdom that is generated anytime you engage in a conversation with this brother. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce and ask him to come to the stage, Nicholas Creighton. So you saw in that Nicholas got picked up by one of the people who's already a Phalanx staff member. And this brother has taught me so much just about reentry in general that just what was shown in the video is just a small snippet of what he brings to Phalanx in terms of making us better, a better organization. We better understand not just reentry citizens, but we better understand black males as a result of the work that he does. We better understand some of the challenges and barriers that our young people are facing. And so what you saw him do for Nicholas and kind of creating a comfortable environment so Nicholas can come in and allow Phalanx to do what Phalanx does. And so that's just one of the strengths of Ricky. So please give a round of applause to Ricky Anderson. So while not featured in this particular clip, I have had the pleasure over the last couple of weeks of watching some video clips from this next person I'm going to introduce. And it's just amazing. I mean, real tear-jerker kind of stuff. He was sentenced at 14. I won't share too much of his story because I'll leave that for him to do. But he was sentenced at 14 at a time when he was given a life sentence. And at 14 years old, he was given a life sentence. And so he had to fight, his family had to fight, and in order to get him, a second chance. And he has done the most with that second chance. He has created artwork that displays the choices that life presents for young men growing up in the inner cities. And he holds groups weekly to talk about those choices and how you make wise choices. And so I could go on and on. I promised him I wouldn't talk for 10 minutes, but I just want to take a moment to introduce Adolfo Davis. And then finally, the last person we got here, just Larry. I actually have been on for several years. He's been an employee at Phalanx for several years. And Larry is adamant, even though he didn't come during the time when we're focusing on reentry, since he's gotten at Phalanx, he has taken a special interest in people who benefit from reentry services. Before I even knew who he was, I watched him conduct groups with young men and saw the passion in what he spoke. But not only that, I saw the way they responded to him. And he has been doing that for Phalanx since he has been there to this very day. Larry is the first person to call and say, we need a group of kids to go and represent Phalanx. Larry will come with a carload, even if he has to pick them up himself. And so please give a round of applause, Larry.
The OG.
All right, so I will start with Nick. And then I'll ask this question to Nick, and then you guys can take turns going down the row. Please, if you have questions for any of the panelists, save them until after everyone has spoken, and then there'll be question and answer time given at the end. So the question, Nick, is this. Can you share briefly a little bit about your story and paying special attention and giving attention to the areas that made you decide that I need to commit to a successful reentry and what that has looked like for you?
Well, first off, let me say that my story is not unique to the 1990s when you're talking about teenagers. The part that is different about my story is that I grew up in Hyde Park. Like, my grandmother lived in Woodlawn, but my mother moved me out of Woodlawn area into Hyde Park. I attended Kenwood Academy. My mother was a great example. She set a standard. She did not tolerate certain things. She was strong, she was fierce, and let me stop talking about it in the past tense because she's still alive. But there was no reason for me to go astray. Like, I had opportunities. That was not the issue for me. The problem for me is that at 18 years old, like with many of the young men in our country, is that there is a certain thing within our culture. Like, there's layers and layers upon stuff that we don't address, and we kind of just, move past it and say, they're kids, they'll get over it. But when you look at the environments and you are surrounded by that kind of depravity, and you wonder why these kids are jumping on buses downtown, you wonder why they're doing the things that they're doing, but then you look at the adults and like, what kind of standard are we setting as adults? But then we're yelling at them and we punishing them and we not listening to them. We're not talking to them. We're not engaging them. We're not seeing the pain that they scream in this music and everything that they do. And so when you kind of, dismissive of it, this is how these kids are going astray, because I was one of those kids. I felt like people ignore me. So I said, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna get a gun. I'm gonna run a block. I'm gonna have 25 guys answering to me, and I'm gonna show you what it means to pay attention to me, because I will create that chaos. I'm guilty. I'm not somebody who was innocent of my crime. And I try to express that clearly because I want people to understand what it looks like. Because I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm simply asking for fairness. Because I was sentenced to a certain term. I completed that term successfully. I think so. And so I'm asking not to be continuously punished. Now, to the second part of your question, when I was incarcerated, I think I was about 21, and I still had about 20 years to do. And I don't hide this. I had reached a point where I felt like I wanted to take my own life. Shortly thereafter, when I decided that I wanted to live, I looked at my life and said, okay, what are all the things that are hurting me? What are the things that are restricting me from moving forward in my life? And I made a decision. Okay, here go the list. Let's start Xing them off the list. Because I said, I'll be 42 by the time I get out. I had no illusions about doing my time.
I just knew I had to be in a better position coming out than the one I came in. But that takes a choice. That takes faith. And it takes support. Because as a kid, when you facing life imprisonment or the death penalty and things like that, you don't know how to absorb that. You don't know how to process that. So it takes a lot, and it takes discipline. And so throughout those years, because what you see in this video, what you see day to day, is a 20-year refinement process. And I'm still going through it. Because when I came home, my mind was warlike. I felt like I was going to be at war every single day that I was walking out here. And, you know, truthfully, some days I still feel like that. But I definitely want to say thank you to everybody, especially at Phalanx, because when I say y'all saved me, I mean that. Because that mentality is still there. There are triggers that are still there that I have to catch myself day to day saying, man, I could go this way and it'd be so much easier. But that's the lie that I'm telling myself because I'm fighting with my ego. Now, you may not see it because I'm presenting myself like I'm supposed to. I'm smiling. I'm being kind because that's a big thing for me. You know, you give kindness and you receive kindness. Because when I come out here, I'm looking at the world, I'm like, God, y'all are horrible to one another. Don't nobody know how to say please and thank you? Like, this is how I was raised. Holding doors. Like, this shouldn't be a mystery. This shouldn't be something that's foreign. Like, what happened to our community, the love and the support? Like, what are we doing? Because when I was in corrections, I was telling somebody this earlier, I had to learn how to re-engage black women. Because I hadn't been around you all in so long, I was scared of you all, terrified. Because I was told that y'all hated us. I was told that society hated us. So this is the thing that we carry with us. When we come out here, we terrified. Like, how are we supposed to function? And so when we meet that resistance, it's like, well, why don't I just go back to what I know? But when you come out and we have that community engagement, when people are opening arms to us and saying, hey, it's okay. We're receptive to that because we need that. Because there's sometimes we still that child that got locked away decades ago that's struggling, that's trying to figure out who we are. And we can't do that alone. So we standing here saying, please help us. And I can assure you, investing in us is not going to be a waste of your time or a waste of investment. I can assure you, this will be a great investment for the entire community.
I guess a little bit about my story. I was incarcerated. I was incarcerated at the age of 17, wrongfully convicted of first-degree murder. My story was kind of like a typical one in which all of the ways the criminal justice system can fail someone poor and black and seemingly forgettable. I was literally probably the first person. I have a small family, so I was literally the only person that ever came in contact with the justice system. So it was new for my family, and it was new for me. And I was the only boy, or I am the only boy. Grew up with 8 sisters, 4 on my mother's side, 4 on my father's side. I didn't know. But yeah, I was the only boy, and always real good in school, very much well behaved. I would say my slide to the streets started late, and again, even though I didn't commit the crime I was accused of, I understand that I put myself in a position where that would happen, and again, once you get in that system, it's a monster, especially to black people and if you're poor. So a lot of my journey was just trying to figure it out, like trying to figure out life, like going through life where you're mad at the system because you're in a place where you shouldn't be, but then at the same time, you got to look at your environment every day, what you're around. You're around some of the worst of the worst. But for me, thankfully, I found some of the best because I learned pretty early, the choices or decision a person make that winds them up in prison isn't who everybody is. So my thing was, I was smart enough when I was young to find individuals like, I'll say like Sadiq up here or Yaakov Delaney. When I was on the inside, you always had positive brothers who would rub that off. And for me, that's what I became. And when you see me today, one of the reasons my transition has been easy is because of the preparation that I made. So going into your second question, and try to be as concise as I can, for me, I think it was like 2011, I happened to get a visit from my best friend. And my best friend, me and him were kind of like the same person, had all of the same interests, football, girls, and karate. And I literally hadn't seen my friend since before we was, football, girls, and karate. And then he came to pay me a visit while I was in Galesburg Correctional Center. And I had a great visit with him. He brought his wife. And after the visit, I was just thinking wow, how am I here and how's he there? We were the same person. How did I end up here? And then kind of like Nick, it came down, what he described, it came down to that self-reflection. So I literally started going through in my mind, what were the choices that I made that led me down the road I did? And long story short, once I figured that out, I began healing myself and I began creating because I seen the exact same issues that I had. I seen them in brothers around me. And all of that work led me to Kiwani, where I met Nick. And it's just so perfect how this story ended because Nick came right before I was going home. And at the time I had built up this kind of new and beautiful program where a lot of administration hated. A lot of people hated it because it was progressive, it was for us. And literally it was just sitting there dying. And then Nick came, I found somebody I could, here, take this. So for him coming home and being a part of this, getting to feel this Phalanx family, this was probably the best gift that I can give him. And I'm glad because I've seen the work, I've seen the healing. And when it comes down to it, that's what we're here for. We need our community to help us heal and for us to do the same back.
Well, at the age of 9, I caught my first robbery. I was pumping gas on 55th and King Drive, and I was hungry, but this day when nobody paid me to pump their gas. So I saw this little girl coming out the store with a bag of food, so I tried to snatch it, but she held on to it, and she dropped $3 food stamp and 75 cents. Food stamps, so y'all don't know, is the old-fashioned link. But
there is some people that don't know.
Yeah, so I picked up the money, went in the game room, bought me something to eat, and the next day I was arrested for robbery. And not one time did the officer say, "Why did you rob this young lady?" And I would have told him I was hungry. I'm from a broken home. My father was a sometimer, and my mother was on drugs. My grandmother did all she could do. And I believed in my heart that my parents are supposed to take care of me, so it led me to the streets. And when I went to the streets, I ran into other kids just like me, searching for somewhere to belong, and we became family. And that led us down the road of self-destruction where we all ended up in prison. I was convicted. I was arrested at the age of 14, but I was found guilty, and I stayed in juvenile detention center. And when I found guilty, I was 16. They sentenced me to life without the possibility of parole. Honestly, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't realize how much time I had until I went to a Stateville Correctional Center, and I was sitting in my cell, and one of the guys like, "Man, you know you got life in prison." I said, "What the hell what you mean?" He said, "You ain't never getting out. You need to go to the law library." And I'm saying, "I'm never getting out," because in my head I was getting out. So it just sent me down a path where I started getting tickets. I went to segregation. I spent 7 straight years in segregation. I spent 4 years and 5 months in the Supermax prison.
And every day I wanted to kill myself. But the only reason why I didn't is because I promised my grandmother, when I was in juvenile, I tried to hang myself. I saw her, she came to see me, but my grandmother, it's like in prison, you got to walk around like everything okay. You got to smile, you got to force a smile, you got to hold back the tears. So when my grandmother come, I could see it in her eyes that she was going through a lot. So in Idaho, you can go look out the window. So every time she leave, I go look out the window, make sure she get on the bus safe. And I seen her crying, and I said, man, I can't do it. I miss my grandma.
You got this. She got you.
So I promised my grandmother that I would never try it again. So every night I just held my sheet and I was just shaking. And to this day, I still don't know how I made it through there, but I thank the Most High because I'm here. So I was sitting in town, Supermax prison, and I was like, man, I'm tired. If I'm gonna die in prison, I can still do some good. So I started mentoring kids through Precious Blood Ministries, through my mentor, Father Kelly, David Kelly. I wrote a book, and Father Kelly, I sent to Father Kelly, he passed it out to the kids, and I was mentoring kids through the mail. And then I left town, Supermax prison. I went back to population. I was still doing the same thing, mentoring, and I was happy. I was like, I'm gonna die here. I can still do some good. So just looking myself in the mirror when I was in towns, I just got tired. I just said, man, if I'm gonna die here, I don't want to die in segregation. So I changed my life, and here I am. And I want to thank Precious Blood. When I first came home, they had a job for me. They gave me a car, and Feli's Family Service, I can't tell y'all much enough. Like, man, I love y'all to death, really, because if you want to know what family is, come to Feli's Family Service. That's what changed my life, man. I just looked myself in the mirror and said, if I'm gonna die in prison, I don't want to see my young brothers and sisters coming back and forth to prison. So it changed my life, and that's why I'm here today.
First of all, let me thank you for that introductory, Sydney. I felt like you were the king of comedy, and you were Steve Harvey, how you brought me out. So thank you. Let me say, this is kind of weird for me, because normally when I talk about my story, it's amongst a small group of individuals. And at one point I was somewhat ashamed of my background. So a lot of people, this is gonna probably surprise you all, to be honest with you. So we wanna know my story. So I didn't grow up rah-rah in the streets or anything like that. My mom was a Jehovah's Witness, and she tried to raise us the best she could. But then it's like dangling a carrot and cake. So she was the carrot and the streets was the cake. And I became attracted to the streets to the point where they don't tell you when you get in the streets and you start hustling, when you never had like a large sum of money. It's like someone that holds a $100 bill and you see the 100, but you don't see what's in their fist. And when you open that fist, dismay, loneliness, frustration, jail, death, all that. You don't see that. You don't see that until the end. So my story starts off, I used to consider myself as the king of crack. Just like a lot of these guys, we fall into the streets, and I fell into the life of hustling. I loved it, And when you hustle, it comes a lot of other stuff, the violence, and I got caught up in the traps of it. When I talk about my story and I tell about it, I'm nervous to tell it. It just feels kind of weird. I wind up, this is probably right. I wind up shooting one of my workers. Not because he stole money or because he let his homie run in my trap and take stuff out. but because he was talking about me behind my back. I used to have a real bad temper. Everybody that know me now, I'm smiley, happy-go-lucky, and hey. But back then I was nothing like that. I didn't even know what a smile was, because to show a smile then really was a sign of weakness. And so, yeah, I shot one of my homies, with one of my little workers, and but a year before that, I had caught another case, which was just as dangerous and violent. And when I beat that case, I caught this one, and they put me right back in front of the same judge. And he was looking at me like, you didn't get enough, so we're gonna show you. So I did my time in jail, and I did 5 years. So I did my time in jail, and I'm gonna be honest with you all, transparent. I didn't learn my lesson when I was in jail, because the same thing I did outside, I was able to do inside, back then. I didn't begin to turn my life around until after I got out. When I first got out, I didn't know what to do. I have never worked a job. I always worked the streets. And I got back out in the streets and I got snatched. And that was one of the most scariest moments for me. And if you all don't know what it is to be snatched, that's when they put you in the trunk of a car and hold you for money or whatever else they feel you're worth. And God, man, thank God I got through that. And so I decided, you know what, it's time for me to make a difference, And the difference was, I felt like I was one of the guys who helped destroy my community when the crack epidemic came. And so I wanted to make a difference. So when Sydney said I'd be standing in front of these kids and I talk to them and try to bring them in, I relate to them. I don't judge them, I understand them. How did I get lost? I used to be out here hugging these blocks, but these blocks don't hug you back. And I had to learn that the hard way, So now my passion is, and this is a passion for me. And I'm gonna be honest, just like these gentlemen said, I love Phalanx. It's the bomb. I have never worked a job where you feel so family orientated. It makes you want to come in and grab these kids and save them and then talk about hey, look, we got this, we got that, we got this, we got that, So, I mean, I can go on and talk about my stuff, and I know my stuff kind of boring compared to these guys, But I feel blessed to be here to share my story with you all and to work with these youth, Because like I said, I was one of them, and I just be wanting to know it is hope for you. I'm no different, and I tell them I'm no different than you are. Meaning, right now, I have a job, but you can have a job too. But that's my time. It's my time.
My pit, and I've had moments with each guy on the stage where I've just been so impressed and enamored by the greatness that they are. That moment for me came with LeRon, ironically, this past week. We had an event last Friday where we were trying to keep the kids from going downtown and getting themselves into trouble. And so we hosted an event at Phalanx in which we had youth from the community come out, and we had activities for them, we had food for them, so that they would have a healthy option to keep themselves from participating in something that we know is maladaptive. And so during that time, I saw LeRon there with his own children, and it reminded me of our first session together when he first came home, and him telling me his motivation for staying out was his kids needed it. So it came full circle in a matter of 60 days, 90 days. I saw him come with this angst and this anxiety and this passion to fill gaps that he had missed, to make up for the mistakes that he had made. And then on this past week, to see him still for me, even though we haven't had a conversation about it. Periodically, I would stop and say, man, how are the kids? And he would say, man, they're good, thanks for asking. But to see him come full circle and to know that he stayed committed to what he set himself out for, just kind of fills my heart. So LeRon, without further ado, the question for you is just to kind of share briefly a little bit about your story and pay special attention to what areas in your life made you commit yourself to a successful reentry.
My story is like everybody else's. Pretty much who was raised and came up on the west side of Chicago.
I was in the streets. You know, I was hustling. I made some poor decisions, and I paid for them, and I'm home now. I don't want to go off all into what happened, but I'm home now, and I'm trying to get everything together. I'm working 2 jobs. Trying to keep these kids out of my pocket, but I got a couple of them in my pocket right now, sitting at this table. But that's my whole motivation, staying out of trouble. I have never been in any trouble before. I'll be 43 this year, if the Lord willing, and you know, being behind that wall for 5 years, and you really find out who love you in the end. You meet people like Miss Sanders and Miss Bailey, and they just welcome you with open arms and show you that it's something greater in the community other than what we're doing, and it's a blessing. And I want to give back full circle. I want to pay forward. I done got away with so much, so I'm kind of content, and I'm able to know that I had to sit down for a second. So that's what happened. I had to sit down for a second, and me sitting down just brought me into meeting these beautiful people. That's basically my story in a nutshell.
So, man, awesome, man. Thank you guys for sharing your stories. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story. Thank you for the commitment that you made. If another black man ever tell you that your presence is needed, I'm telling you now. Thank you. We need you, and it's a blessing to meet you. So if there are any questions for any other panelists, now's the time to take questions.
Hello, my brothers. I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. Thank you for being vulnerable. My question is, because I know that coming home, it takes us a while, right? We're home physically, but like mentally and emotionally. Like, what has anyone ever asked you in your first week or your first days, like, what was the most harmful thing emotionally that was bothering you guys? And have you guys had a chance to talk about those things or have people to support you? And what does that mean when people ask you about you, your personal heart, like your emotions?
I'll jump on that one. For me personally, I would say the biggest hurt, and that's why I'm so excited for some of the work that we plan on doing here at Phalanx, and that's, is this thing up? Hello? Who would have thought? Turn it on. One of the greatest things that I know I'm still healing with is the abandonment and the isolation. It's kind of hard to explain, but when I say most people that are returning, especially from a long-term incarceration, this is the biggest void that you will see in all of us. It's that abandonment that most people feel. I would say 95%. Like, if you get to see what those visiting rooms look like, and the communication that people have with their families, prison is meant to destroy that. So for one, you feel abandonment because the people that are most important to you from your life and your community, you're shut off from all of that. So that's the abandonment. But then comes the isolation. We are human beings. We are essentially social creatures. We're supposed to feel and love and be around, But when you're in prison, like my brother said, I don't know if y'all got that. He said he spent 7 years in isolation. Like, 7 years in isolation. I think about, like, there were like months where only person I had to talk to was the person that came and put the food through the tray. Like, that's not how you have a whole and healthy human being. You know, like 95% of the people that are incarcerated will come back home. So I don't know if people understand, like, these are gonna be your neighbors. This is us. This is what was done to us. And when you see us, like, we are more the, I don't even want to say more the exception, because I know a lot of good brothers that made it out, but I think about all the ones that didn't. So for me, I just, the abandonment and the isolation, because those things are not human. And when you see a lot of individuals that are coming home, that's a lot of our struggles. And that's what affects the mental health.
Awesome, thank you, Ricky. Just as I would be remiss not to mention this as a therapist, what he just said rings true. We all know this to be true because we saw during the COVID shutdown, every statistical number of everything bad went on the rise. Alcoholism was up, drug addictions were up, domestic violence was up. All of the things that indicate the problems in society were on the rise due to COVID because of the very isolation that Ricky is talking about. So thank you for sharing that. Any other questions or comments?
I want to touch on that too. For me, I be up for days because I don't want to wake back up in prison. I used to have dreams when I was in prison that I was free until somebody put something on a chokehold or you hear some noise, you wake up like, oh my God.
Still here.
I know I'm here because I feel the love, but sometimes I don't. My reality for 29 years, so for me, it's hard for me to sleep. I be up until I just fall out. And I try to share with the people in my circle, but they can't really understand because they haven't been through it. So it's always, if you notice, you always see a lot of us hang out together because we trust each other, because we understand the struggle that we've been through and what we going through. It just because we free, we ain't free. I still be like, bring me a tray, a plate. You know, one time I got in the shower with my boxers on. That's some prison stuff. It takes a lot. I've been out 3 years now, but it ain't no telling how long it's going to take for me to detox from that way of life because that's all I knew. Prison cells, bars, clicking on the doors, and it's just like orange crush, oh my God. But that's a whole different story, but people need to understand, be patient with us because we really trying to figure out this life because I don't know how this life is out here. So I'm still trying to figure it out. So the patience from the community is needed because if you don't be patient with us, it just push us away and some of us will turn back to our old ways. So being patient with us and help understanding that it's a process that we got to go through to get past being institutionalized. So just being patient with us and understand, man, we still going through it. Even though we smile and we come to work every day, y'all help us. When I walk into Fairlinks and I see Miss D at the desk, let's start off the smile. And then you walk through there, then you just see everybody, how you doing, Mr. Davis? You doing okay? And you know it's genuine. It ain't just something that people say just to get you back. How you doing back? But it's genuine to have conversations. It's good to have a conversation with somebody other than your cellmate or the officer that stand by your door and kick it with you for 5 minutes and really be looking at your cell and see he's gonna shake you down or not. But you know what I'm saying? It's real, so I appreciate the love and support that we receive from everyone in this room for being here. And it just helped me personally. When I leave this space, I'm gonna be in a better space because y'all didn't have to be here. So I appreciate that. One time I got in the shower with my boxers on. That's some prison stuff. It takes a lot. I've been out 3 years now, but it ain't no telling how long it's going to take for me to detox from that way of life, because that's all I knew. Prison cells, bars, clicking on the doors, and it's just like Orange Crush, oh my God. But that's a whole different story. But people need to understand, like, be patient with us, because we really trying to figure out this life, because I don't know how this life is out here. So I'm still trying to figure it out. So the patience from the community is needed, because if you don't be patient with us, it just push us away and turn us, and some of us will turn back to our old ways. So being patient with us and help and understanding that it's a process that we got to go through to get past being institutionalized. So just being patient with us and understand, like, man, we still going through it. Even though we smile and we come to work every day, y'all help us. When I walk into Phalanx and I see Miss D at the desk, let's start off the smile. And then you walk through there, then you just see everybody, how you doing, Mr. Davis? You doing okay? And you know it's genuine. It ain't just something that people say just to get you back. Like, how you doing, man? But it's genuine to have conversations. It's good to have a conversation with somebody other than your cellmate or the officer that stand by your door and kick it with you for 5 minutes and really be looking at your cell and see if he's gonna shake you down or not. But it's real, so I appreciate the love and support that we receive from everyone in this room for being here. And it just helped me personally. When I leave this space, I'm gonna be in a better space because y'all didn't have to be here. So I appreciate that.
Post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress teaches us that a single traumatic incident can follow a person for the rest of their lives and can create discord and disharmony and difficult life situations from one single incident. And you're looking at a man that was locked up for 29 years, that was in isolation for 7 years. And so when we start talking about complicated and complex trauma, then thank you for sharing that, because that's something that, because you're so high functioning, that we'll overlook that. And we'll see you with your head down and we'll be like, oh, what's wrong with the dog? But from now on, now that you said that, man, I think everybody here at Phalanx, let's make sure that we take a moment when we, not just them, but all of us, because whether we've been in prison or not, we come from communities where trauma is prevalent. And we're talking about, we come from communities where trauma has been stigmatized in a way that we feel like something wrong with us rather than confess that something wrong with me. It's okay to not be okay. And sometimes we don't make it that way for each other, so thank you for touching on that. I think we got more questions.
Oh, gee, I want to touch on that first question.
Oh, okay. I'll come right back to you right now.
Want me to answer the question?
Yeah, so Larry, want to touch on that first?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief because I want to kind of piggyback off something Adolfo said and then answer him. You're not going to ever forget it. It's going to always be with you. I've been out over 20 years now, and it's still, I don't sleep at nights. I share that with Sid. I get up, I'm at the window like Malcolm X, looking what they doing. You know what I'm saying? It's a paranoia that you have. And you are brainwashed. Because the years I was in there, and they can concur with this, my name is B33804. You're a number. You're cattle. You know what I'm saying? That, to me, that's that institutionalized right there. When you make me remember this, I remembered my penitentiary ID number before I even remember my social security number. And that's how they used to address you, by that number. And you had to answer, you know? So depending on what year, you can be penalized for it. So, and then at 7 years, yeah, I could just only imagine, you know, I only did one, but I raised havoc during that 1 year. I ain't gonna even know that to you. I was still young, I was doing the bad stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, loud enough. I'm going to keep my question simple because I can get real into it. Most of you probably came out on parole. I want you to tell me what that feels like?
So most of these guys are like new. When I was out on parole, I'm gonna be honest, back then, when I got out, I only called the flux because I requested to be transferred to Champaign, and my parole officer was real prejudiced. His name was Mr. White, ironically. And he was looking for every little thing to back. He told me, breathe wrong, I'm gonna violate you, yeah. So I had to do the maximum parole, but when they brought me back up here, it wasn't too bad because I did everything I was supposed to do, because, you don't want to go back. So, hey, I didn't even jaywalk, for real. I crossed at the corner when the light turned green. Man, you ain't gonna rush? No, you go across the street. I see you. Meet me over there, But that's my experience, though. Nah, no.
Don't worry, I don't even throw out garbage.
Right.
Probably because I'm still on parole. I'm fresh out, so I've been out about 6 months now. Mine is twofold. So for a few of us up here, we have to do parole, plus we have to register as a violent offender, which means not only am I dealing with a parole agent, I have to go to the local police station once a year, and I have to update them about everything that's going on in my life for the next 10 years. So once my parole is up, which my agent is pretty good because I'm in the south suburbs, drops, I'm a walk-in warrant. So wherever I am, he has the right to come and search whatever. That's how it goes. These are the stipulations. But even after my 3 years of parole, the 10-year registry can still send me back to prison. So say if I get a different job and I fail to go to the police station to alert them of this, and they find out, that can send me back to prison even though I am off parole. And that's for 10 years. And then once I do the time that's set, which is, I think it's 2 to 5 in prison, when I come out again, that resets for an additional 10 years. Now, mind you, this is only in the state of Illinois, because if I leave the state of Illinois, it doesn't follow. So these are some of the parameters that they also push upon us after we've served our term, our sentence. So just to be mindful.
Okay, question in the back.
So I am the time, got about 8 minutes left, just so y'all know. This is gonna be a little bit of a deeper question, to touch on the previous questions. I think as humans, when people do unto us, we do hold it in. It's just in our nature. And I wanted to ask you all, how do you deal with the resentment or the anger that you might have for those that did you wrong, whether it be the correctional officer, the judge, people in the family that, kind of stopped communicating with you. How do you all deal with that now, knowing what's at stake and knowing what you're trying to accomplish in life now?
Okay, so with me, because I failed to mention this earlier, the only resentment I had, because I did have somewhat of a loving family, prior to going to the penitentiary, I was shot in the head. And the guy that shot me in the head, ironically, they got locked up. Around the same time I got locked up, they just wouldn't put us together. So for years while I was in there, I held on to a whole resentment for that. Like, I was planning not to never come home, because I'm being honest, I was hoping to catch the guy. But as time grew on and now I'm out, and me and the doctor was talking about it, I learned to forgive. The guy that shot me in the head was a minor. He was a juvenile. And when they passed that law, that it was unconstitutional to give him life, because when they shot me in the head, they shot 7 other people. So they had 2 murders and 7 attempt murders that day. And they was coming to my job when I was at Martha's at the time, sweating, like, hey, he's finna get out. We can keep him back in. And I told the prosecutor that I need him. He been locked up for just as long as these gentlemen. I need him. I need his help with these kids. They can't help me. He has experience. He know what it's like in there. So I needed him. So to answer your question, I've learned over time to forgive, because having a resentment got me them 5 years. But that's just my story.
Like I mentioned earlier, before I went to prison, I hated my mother and my father because I felt like if they would have been the parents that I needed, I wouldn't have ended up in prison. My mother only came to see me because my grandmother paid her to come see me. And my father came to see me one time when I was in the juvenile detention center, but he didn't come really to see me. My sister on my father's side called a case, and he came to see her, and he just stopped back to see me. And he told me all this stuff, gave me his phone number, like, I love you. I went to school the next day to call him. It was a bogus number. It was in 1993. I haven't seen my father in like 20 years later. And my mother, I haven't seen my mother until I walked from juvenile until I walked out of prison. I haven't seen my mother since like 1992 until I walked out of prison. But I had to understand like something in their life affected them so they can to become the people that they became, so they couldn't be the good parents to me. So if I ask people to forgive me and understand my circumstances, I had to do the same for my mother and my father. So right now, every week I go, my father paralyzed now. He had a stroke. He paralyzed from the neck down. So every week I go give him a bath, wash him up, make sure that he's okay. And he be crying, and you know, he cried, he choked, so I don't know if he gonna die. So one day he just wrote out, he can't spell, so he just wrote, he punched the letters like, I'm proud of you. And that was the first time in my life he ever said that. So I was so grateful. And I go, my mother lived in Dalton, so I go see her once a week to make sure that she have food. And she always asks me like, why do you love me so much after everything I put you through? And I basically tell them, you my mother. You have your own story, I have my own story, but at the end of the day, you my mom and I love you, and ain't nobody gonna, if anybody try to touch you, I'm on it because you my mother and you only get one. So all the hatred that I felt for them, it went away because I wanted forgiveness. I wanted someone to understand like how did I end up in this situation in the first place. I had to understand how my mother and my father ended up being the people that they are. So once I understood that, I was able to love them, respect them, and have their back. And we have the best relationship right now. So holding on to that only hurts you. You have to find some way to let it go, because if you don't, you'll be stuck in that place for the rest of your life and you won't be happy. And that was the reason why I was in segregation for 7 years, and I went to town Supermax prison because I allowed the pain that I felt and the anger for them to come out on the people that's close to me. And that's the brothers that's in prison, that's going through the same thing I was going through, the staff there. All staff ain't bad, but I let it out on them. And then I had to look myself in the mirror and say, man, look, everybody have a story. You just got to open your ears and your heart to receive it. And once you receive it, you will be able to give that same thing back. So that's holding on to that, it's not worth it.
So, unfortunately, we're out of time in terms of questions. I do want to thank you guys again, man, from the bottom of my heart. Man, we linked now, arm in arm, and so we're moving forward together. To the audience, I just kind of want to say it was great to share these, to listen to these stories, but let's be mindful too. We heard about a young man who struggled to find his place in our culture that can be sometimes so cruel. we're playing the dozens. And when we're doing these things as kids, or we're allowing these things to exist among kids, and we sit around and act like it's not doing damage. The old tale, sticks and stones break my bones, but words that never hurt me is a lie. Words destroy us. And so we need to, so let's be mindful of that. Be mindful of the fact that we heard about a boy who was wrongfully convicted at 17 and had nobody rallying around his defense in order to help him overcome the obstacle that life had presented his way. Be mindful of the fact that we heard from a 9-year-old boy who stole because he had no place to go and nothing to eat. And allow this to continue to motivate us to do the work that we do. Let's recognize our importance in this struggle, because while we sit here listening to the stories of 5 men, the jails and prisons are filled with men whose stories are similar. The streets are filled with young boys who this will be their story if there's not an intervention in between. So let's keep that in mind, and let's let that motivate and drive us so that when we're tired, we're frustrated, we can dig deep and remind ourselves that, man, we're serving a purpose and our community needs us.